At my engagement party, my parents caused a mess. My dad stood up and said, "She's just a gold digger, always has been." I couldn't breathe. "You're drunk," I muttered. He replied, "I'm finally honest." But what my fiancé's sister said next made everyone look at me differently. I remember that night like it was yesterday. It was supposed to be a celebration. My fiancé, Liam, and I had been together for 3 years, and after a romantic proposal in the park, a moment I thought was going to be the most memorable of my life, we decided to throw a party to announce our engagement. His family was warm and welcoming, and I thought my family would make an effort to be the same. I even worked hard to make everything perfect: the decorations, the food, the guest list. I wanted it to be a night to remember for all the right reasons. But somehow, things were already starting to feel off. The moment we arrived at Liam's parents' house, I felt a familiar weight in my chest. His family was already mingling and talking, but there was something in the air, a difference in energy. It wasn't that they didn't like me, it was just that they were so different from my own. Liam's mom was kind, her smile genuine, and his father was always making people laugh. They were, in every sense of the word, a happy family. A family that seemed to know how to support and care for each other. My own family was a different story. The night was meant to be about celebrating Liam and me, but I couldn't shake the growing unease in my stomach as I caught sight of my parents standing in the corner. My mom had her arms crossed, watching everyone with a gaze that I couldn't quite interpret. My dad, on the other hand, was already at the bar, sipping on something stronger than I'd like to admit. I didn't want to make a scene, but I knew that, at some point, my dad would be the one to stir things up. "Are you okay?" Liam asked, noticing me glance at my parents. "Yeah, just a little, you know." "Nervous," I muttered, trying to smile. He squeezed my hand, reassuring me. "They'll come around. They just need to see how happy we are." I nodded, but the knot in my stomach wouldn't loosen. As the evening unfolded, the atmosphere was mostly light. Liam's family was laughing and joking, the music in the background only adding to the sense of joy. But the more I tried to focus on the party, the more my mind kept drifting back to my dad. He had always been the life of the party, charming, the guy everyone wanted to be around. But tonight, he wasn't the same. He kept glancing at me like he had something on his mind. I tried to push it aside, but I could feel the tension building. It wasn't long before Liam decided to give a toast. He had always been confident and clear when speaking in front of people, and I couldn't help but smile as he raised his glass. "To my beautiful fiancée, Amelia," Liam said, his voice carrying warmth. "You make every day brighter. I can't wait to spend the rest of my life with you." I blushed, and the room applauded. I felt so incredibly lucky. But then, something I hadn't expected happened. From across the room, my father stood up. The conversation around us immediately quieted, as people sensed something wasn't right. My dad wasn't typically the kind of person who spoke at events, especially not unless he had something to say. His face was flushed from the alcohol, and his eyes were locked onto me. I exchanged a glance with Liam, whose expression shifted from joy to concern in an instant. "Everyone," my dad called out, his voice thick with drink, "I need to say something. I've watched this girl for years now, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I don't know what's going on. Amelia," he said, pointing a finger in my direction, "is just a gold digger. Always has been. And this right here? This engagement? It's all about the money. I've seen it before, and I'm not going to let you all be fooled." The room went completely still. I felt like the breath had been knocked out of me. The heat rushed to my face as my heart began to race, my hands trembling. I couldn't process what he had just said. It was like the world had tilted off its axis. "Dad," I murmured, my voice low, barely audible over the thick tension in the room. "You're drunk." The crowd shifted, awkwardly glancing from me to him. I could see Liam's jaw tightening, but he said nothing at first. He didn't want to escalate things. But I was stunned. I was utterly paralyzed by his words. My father stumbled a little, steadied himself, and then leaned into the microphone a bit closer. "No," he said, slurring the words slightly. "I'm finally honest. All these years, I've kept quiet, but I won't stand by and watch my son make the same mistake." I could hear the muffled gasps from the people around us. It felt like time had stopped. My eyes were welling up with tears, but I refused to cry in front of everyone. I wasn't sure whether I was angry, hurt, or embarrassed, but I knew I couldn't let this go without saying something. "You're wrong," I said, my voice trembling, but I forced the words out. "You don't know what you're talking about." But my father didn't seem to care. His eyes were full of conviction, his words heavy with years of resentment that I hadn't even realized had been building. It wasn't until I felt Liam's hand on my shoulder, steady and warm, that I realized how much I needed his support. He looked at my dad, his expression calm but firm. "This isn't the time or place for this," Liam said quietly, trying to defuse the situation. "We're here to celebrate, not fight." But my father wasn't backing down. He just shook his head, clearly feeling justified in his accusations. It was like a part of him wanted to see me broken. Then, out of nowhere, Liam's sister, Hannah, stood up. She had been quiet most of the evening, observing from the sidelines, but now she had everyone's attention. "Actually," she began, her voice carrying across the room, "I think we need to talk about this." Everyone turned to her, and I could feel my heart in my throat. I had no idea what she was about to say, but somehow, I knew it was going to be important. "Amelia is not what you think," Hannah continued, looking directly at my father. "She's been nothing but kind and loving to all of us. And I know that some of you have your doubts, but let's be real here, this isn't about money. It's about love. And you need to let that be enough." The entire room fell silent again. My dad's face was unreadable, his mouth opening and closing as though he were struggling to find words. "You don't know her," Hannah said, shaking her head. "But I do. And she's family. So, Dad, if you want to keep pretending like this is all some kind of game, then maybe you're the one who's not seeing things clearly." My father seemed stunned into silence, as if the sharpness of her words had cut through him in a way he hadn't expected. He opened his mouth to say something, but nothing came out. For the first time that night, I saw my father hesitate. The awkwardness in the room began to fade, replaced by a reluctant calmness. People slowly started talking again, but I could feel my pulse still racing. My eyes found Liam, who gave me a small, reassuring smile. "I'm sorry about that," he whispered. I nodded, grateful for the support, but I couldn't help but wonder, where did this leave me? Where did it leave us? How could I go back to a family that had never truly understood me? I stood there, trying to gather my composure, but my father's words continued to echo in my mind, loud and sharp. I had never felt so exposed, so vulnerable. The faces of the guests were a blur as I tried to blink back the tears. It wasn't just the fact that he'd accused me of something so awful, but the hurt in his eyes, as though he truly believed it. He wasn't just angry at me, he was disappointed, like I had failed him in some fundamental way. The silence lingered for a long time after Hannah's words. My dad, for once, seemed unsure of himself. He sat back down at the bar, his hands gripping the glass tightly, his posture stiff. I couldn't read his face. He wasn't even looking at me anymore. I was left with the uncomfortable knowledge that everything had changed. The dynamic between my father and me had always been strained, but it had never been like this, publicly airing our dirty laundry, in front of everyone who mattered to me. I felt as though the whole room had witnessed a private battle that no one should have had to see. Liam noticed my stiff shoulders, the way I was physically holding myself back, and he stepped closer. He didn't ask if I was okay, because we both knew the answer. Instead, he simply put his arm around me, pulling me close enough so that I could feel the steady beat of his heart. "I'm sorry," he said softly. His voice was low, but it carried an edge of frustration, toward my father, toward the situation. I leaned into him, feeling the warmth of his body against mine, the familiar scent of his cologne grounding me. "I don't know what's worse," I said quietly. the fact that he said it, or the fact that he believes it? Liam didn't say anything at first. I knew he was thinking, processing everything that had just unfolded. We both stood there in silence, watching as people slowly began to resume their conversations. It felt like the world was moving on without us, as though my father's outburst was nothing more than a minor disruption in a play everyone else was still watching. But I couldn't just ignore it. Not this time. After a few moments, Liam squeezed my shoulder and kissed the top of my head. You don't need to carry that weight, Amelia. You've done nothing wrong. I nodded, but the heaviness of it still hung over me. His words were comforting, but I felt a deep pit in my stomach, as though I was trapped between two worlds, one where I could simply walk away from my family's judgment and the other where I had to reconcile my past with who I was becoming. My father's voice cut through my thoughts. Amelia. I turned to see him standing at the edge of the bar, watching me, his expression unreadable. It was as though he was waiting for something, waiting for me to make the next move. I felt a sharp pang of anger rise in my chest, but I pushed it down. The last thing I wanted was to cause a scene, not in front of everyone. Liam noticed the shift in my demeanor. Don't, he whispered, sensing the tension in my body. Don't go over there. He's not going to say anything useful. But I couldn't just let it go. The need for closure, for understanding, was gnawing at me. This was my father, after all. With a deep breath, I walked toward him, Liam's hand briefly squeezing mine before letting go. Dad, I said, my voice quieter now, the words weighed down by a mix of sadness and frustration. Why would you say that? Why would you do this, in front of everyone? For a moment, there was nothing but silence. He didn't answer immediately, his eyes shifting to the drink in his hand. When he finally spoke, it was more subdued than before. I didn't want to see you make the same mistake I did. His words were slow, measured. I've seen it happen before. People get caught up in the illusion of love, and then it all falls apart. I just didn't want you to get hurt. I wasn't sure what to feel. Part of me wanted to shout at him, to tell him how unfair and cruel he was being. But there was also a part of me that understood, in a way. My father had always been protective in his own twisted way, but his protectiveness had come across more as control, as if he couldn't stand the idea of me making my own decisions. Don't you trust me? I asked, the question escaping before I had the chance to stop it. I wasn't sure where it came from, but it felt like the right question. He didn't meet my eyes. Instead, he stared down at his drink again. His lips tightened, and for a brief moment, I wondered if I had made a mistake by coming over. I'm not sure, Amelia, he finally muttered, almost to himself. I've been wrong before. Maybe I'm wrong now. There it was. My father had never been one to admit when he was wrong, and hearing him say it out loud, so quietly, was like hearing a confession from someone I didn't even recognize anymore. But I also felt something shift. The anger started to dissolve, replaced with a sadness I didn't expect. Maybe this was his way of apologizing, in the only way he knew how. Maybe, just maybe, he didn't know how to say he was sorry for everything he had said. But in that moment, I felt a fragile thread of hope that we could find some kind of understanding. I'm not going anywhere, Dad, I said softly, my voice a little steadier than before. I love Liam, and I'm marrying him. You can't stop that. His eyes finally lifted to meet mine, and for the first time that night, I saw a flicker of something like regret, mixed with the ghost of pride. He didn't say anything, but he didn't need to. We were both standing on different sides of a wide, growing gap, one that had been created by years of misunderstandings, hurt, and unspoken words. But in that brief exchange, I realized we weren't so far apart that we couldn't bridge the distance. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but there was a chance. As I turned to walk back to Liam, my heart felt a little lighter, the knot in my stomach loosening ever so slightly. I wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like I had a small piece of control over it. Liam was waiting for me, his eyes filled with concern but also a quiet understanding. Without a word, he wrapped his arms around me, and I rested my head on his shoulder, finding solace in his presence. For a moment, everything felt okay. I didn't need my father's approval, not like I had thought I did. What mattered was that I had found someone who truly saw me, who truly loved me. And that was enough. But even with Liam's comforting embrace, I knew the battle wasn't over. There was still the question of what came next. Would my father ever accept Liam? Would my family ever understand? For now, I didn't have the answers, but I felt a small spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, everything would work itself out. As I stood there, wrapped in Liam's embrace, I realized that what had happened that night wasn't something I could just forget or easily move on from. The tension between my family and me had reached a breaking point, but more importantly, it had cracked open a truth I had been avoiding for years. My father, for all his faults, had always held a kind of power over me, a power that I hadn't even fully understood until now. His hurtful words had cut deeper than I wanted to admit. But I wasn't going to let them define me. Not anymore. Liam's soft voice pulled me from my thoughts. "Amelia, I don't care about your dad's opinion," he said, his voice steady and reassuring. "What matters is how you feel about us, how you feel about me. We've been through worse together, right?" I nodded against his chest, feeling the warmth of his words sink in. For the first time, I felt like I could take control of the narrative, not just of my relationship with Liam, but of my relationship with my family. The weight I'd been carrying for so long was starting to lift, and while I didn't have all the answers, I knew one thing for sure: I was going to do this on my terms. The rest of the evening passed in a haze. People tried to return to the celebration, but the energy had shifted. The joy we had all been hoping for was clouded by the tension of what had just transpired. I could feel the eyes of the room on me as I quietly moved to a corner with Liam and his sister, Hannah. The murmurs of the crowd continued, but they no longer mattered. Liam's family was supportive, as always. They didn't ask too many questions about what had just happened. They simply offered me comfort and encouragement. But my mind kept going back to my father, sitting at the bar, his face hidden behind a glass of whiskey. His words stung, but more than that, I realized I'd been letting him control too much of my life for too long. Later that evening, when the last of the guests had trickled out, Liam and I stood by the door, about to leave. His hand was in mine, and I felt his strength. But before we could slip out, my mother approached me. She looked tired, almost defeated, her eyes downcast as if she, too, had come to terms with something. "I'm sorry, Amelia," she said quietly. "Your father didn't mean what he said." I gave her a strained smile, but it didn't reach my eyes. "He meant it, Mom. He just didn't have the courage to say it until now. He's been thinking it for a long time." She looked at me, her gaze filled with sorrow. "He's just scared. He's afraid you'll leave him behind. He's afraid of losing you, the way he lost everything else. His business, his friends, his way of life." The words stung. "So, he decided to tear me down to make himself feel better?" She shook her head. "No, I don't think he meant it like that. But you've always been a reminder of how far he's fallen. You're all he has left, and he's afraid of letting go. He's always been afraid of change." I took a long, deep breath, the weight of her words sinking in. I knew what she was trying to say, but it didn't excuse his actions. "I'm done letting him control me," I said firmly. "It's not just about me, Mom. It's about Liam, too. He's not a mistake or someone I'm just settling for. He's the one I'm choosing, and that's something my father needs to accept." My mom nodded slowly, her lips pressing together. "I understand. But know this, Amelia. I will always be here for you. You and Liam. No matter what." I squeezed her hand, finally feeling like I was being seen, not as my father's daughter, but as myself. It was a few days later when the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. I had decided that I wouldn't just let my father's words linger. If he wasn't going to be a part of this new chapter in my life willingly, then I was going to make him see the consequences of his actions. Not through cruelty or revenge, but by showing him that I didn't need him to validate my happiness. I sat down and wrote him a letter. It wasn't something I thought I would ever do, but I needed him to understand, in my own words, why this was so painful. Dad, I don't know what you expected from me when you stood up at the engagement party and made the accusations you did. But I do know one thing: that night, you told me who you thought I was. And I've spent my whole life trying to prove you wrong. I've tried so hard to be the daughter you wanted, the one who could make you proud, the one who could take on the world and never ask for anything in return. But I can't do that anymore. I can't keep pretending that everything is okay when you keep treating me like I'm not enough. I'm not a gold digger. I'm not a disappointment. I'm a woman who's found love with someone who sees me for who I really am, and who treats me like I'm worthy of his love. Maybe, just maybe, you've been afraid of letting me go. But what you need to understand is that I'm not going anywhere. I'm moving forward. And if you can't be a part of that, then that's your choice, not mine. I'm done hiding. Done feeling like I'm not enough. And I'll never let you or anyone else make me feel like I'm unworthy of happiness again. Amelia. I had Liam read the letter before I sent it. He held it in his hands for a long moment, his eyes scanning over the words. Then he looked up at me, his expression unreadable for a brief second before he smiled. I'm proud of you, he said simply. I don't know if he'll ever read it, I confessed. But I need to send it anyway. It's not for him. It's for me. Liam nodded in understanding. And that's what matters. A week passed, and I didn't hear from my father. And honestly, I didn't expect to. But then, on a Friday evening, as I was sitting on the couch with Liam, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something inside me told me it was him. I answered the call, my heart racing. Amelia, my father's voice crackled over the line, sounding older than I remembered. I got your letter. I swallowed, my throat dry. Did you read it? Yeah, he said quietly. I did. And I've been thinking a lot about what I said, about you, and about everything. You're right. I've been trying to hold on to something that's already gone. I never wanted to see you leave me, but I see now that I've been holding you back. I've been unfair. I'm sorry. The apology didn't erase the hurt, but it was a start. I don't need your approval, Dad, I said firmly. But I do need you to understand that I'm choosing my own path now. And that path includes Liam. He's my future, whether you like it or not. There was a long pause before he spoke again, his voice softer this time. I understand, Amelia. I'll try. I'm not perfect, and I've messed up, but I'm here if you need me. Just, don't shut me out completely. I took a deep breath, feeling a small but significant weight lift off my shoulders. I'm not shutting you out. But I'm also not going to keep pretending everything's fine. I need to take care of myself, too. We hung up shortly after that, and I put the phone down, feeling strangely at peace. The weeks that followed weren't perfect. My father still had his issues, but at least there was an openness now. He hadn't fully embraced Liam, but he was trying. And that was enough for me. Liam and I got married a few months later in a small ceremony with close friends and family. It wasn't a fairy tale, but it was real. And in the end, that was all that mattered. As I stood there, hand in hand with Liam, I realized something important. I had finally found my voice. And even if my family didn't completely understand me, I knew that I had the power to shape my own future. And I wasn't going to let anyone, least of all my father, define me anymore.